Good evening, and it's great that everybody's here. And I would like to start by having each unit call their unit to order. So Stan, if we can start with you, and we'll go around the table this way.
Stan Gowan, I'll call the select board from Bernardston to order.
Dan Campbell, I'll call the Finance Committee to order from Northfield.
Glenn Caffrey, I'll call the select board from Leyden in order.
Alex Meisner, I'll call the Northfield Select Board to order.
Jane Dutcher, I'll call the Bernardston Finance Committee to order. And you didn't
Yeah,
call.
we don't have quorum.
You don't have a quorum?
Yeah.
Okay. If you do get one,
Okay.
let me know. I know that everybody probably knows that Lois Stearns, who normally was sitting next to me for these meetings, passed away Tuesday night. And Dan is going to say a few words about her, and then we'll have a moment of silence in her honor.
I think the empty chair over there is pretty appropriate. Lois was on a finance committee for about 20 some odd years. When she just 25 years, as a matter of fact. Before that, she was a select board member. She gave her heart and soul to the town of Northfield. I feel very blessed to take her place, and I'd like to have a moment of silence for Lois Stearns. Thank you.
Thank you. We have set aside 15 minutes for 3-minute presentations by anyone who wishes to speak. And the only one who mentioned that they would like to do that is Alan Genovese for the 6-town planning district. So Alan, if you'd like to bring us up to date.
Sure. So I'm the first one to figure this out. Am I going over there?
Yes.
So all the mistakes I make, learn from them. And I heard something about a green button.
Yeah, there's a button on top of it. Just press and hold until you see green light.
Just don't hit the red button.
I don't see a green button. Do you see a green button?
Oh, there's only one button on it.
Here, now it's green.
Press and hold it.
All right, 3 minutes starting a minute ago. Can you hear me?
No.
No. You just have to talk about it. That's just for the recording.
Oh, okay. So am I loud enough for people in the room? All right, so I will do this very quickly. The planning board's been working on your behalf for the past 4 years, and we were studying the feasibility of forming a new school district, looking at the educational aspects of it as well as the financial piece. During several consultants' reports, it became clear that the educational benefits for programs and services and opportunities for kids were significant, and the different renditions that we did on the assessments seemed reasonable. So with that and a lot of work on the planning board, which I've been blessed to serve as their chair, because we have had perspectives, many perspectives, a lot of respect for each other in offering different opinions. We've moved through this process. It's taken 4 years. COVID slowed us down a little bit, and we had to loop back. But we feel we have a lot of good information, and it led us to the conclusion on January 3rd. We took a vote to move forward and form a regional or a planning subcommittee. And because of the way this process works, or needs to work, is the subcommittee needs to be of the planning board. So we've reached out to the select boards in a communication, explained the process, and we're looking for the select boards to solicit, talk to folks and who might be interested in serving on this subcommittee. And then recommendations would be made to the planning board. Obviously, it's our intent to honor anyone that you bring forward. And we're hoping on March 19th, when we have our next meeting, that we'll be making some of these appointments if it's possible that we have names to move forward with that. It's the expectation that these representatives are serving you, and so we'd like multiple perspectives. It's the expectation that they would be keeping you in the loop, and it's going to be heavily the membership lean toward members of the communities, because ultimately it's the towns that would be voting whether or not to do this, approve a regional a potential regional agreement. So we're thinking that if we had 2 representatives from each town, there may be 2, possibly 3 from the planning board, but we really want complete representation from the towns. It's a long process going through this. I'm probably over optimistic to think that we might have that aspect of it completed by February of 2025. If we were to achieve that, whenever that does happen, there's a whole nother process that would happen, that we would expect to happen. We'd want each town to have their attorneys look at the agreement and provide feedback. We would want both school districts to do the same. We'll be keeping DESI informed along the way, but they will have to also review it. And then, depending on how long that takes, we would look at the next step and when it would be feasible to bring to a town meeting vote. There may be a process that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has to approve that moving forward in December of the preceding year. If that happens, that would push it off another year. So I've got more research to do on that. We hired engaged the services of Mars Consulting Group to do the heavy lifting in this process. Those that might have an interest, we'd like you to have them know that all those meetings will be remote. The subcommittees will try to arrange a time that it's convenient for them. And then basically the subcommittees will be doing the work, but the consultants will be doing the heavy lifting for most of that. And we'll really value your input, because you're going to shape this process, not the consultants, not the planning board. Ultimately, when this is done, the 6-town regional planning board would have to take a vote on anything that had materialized.
Time.
Thank you very much, Jane. I appreciate it. And thank you for the work you're doing. And I feel the loss of Lois. She was an amazing person, and she's a loss to everyone in this room. She's represented all the towns, and she will be missed. Thank you.
Okay. No one else contacted me, so I'm assuming no one else wishes to speak. The first thing we had on our agenda is the district agreement. Or any comments or questions or discussion about that document? I will start by saying I sat down and compared it with the Hart proposal that was delivered to the school in 2019, February of 2019. And I have a marked up copy with corrections and questions. And I don't think you want to go through my corrections and questions. My first comment was that line 2 says this district agreement was originally approved in 2021, unless it means 1921, and that it was amended in July of 99. So I don't know how it got amended before it got approved, but that's what it says. And I proceeded to read carefully from there. Some of my markups are just grammatical or typing errors. Others are more substantive. Does everybody have a copy of this, or anybody have a copy? Bring.
I will state my opinion.
Sure, Stan.
I'm Stan Garland. Like I said, my opinion of the district agreement is it's definitely too late to go to town meeting, because it has we have a lot of work as far as looking at it. And I think somewhere in the process, we have to have a meeting with the select board heads and finance heads, and put down what we think we would like to see in an agreement. One of my things, and again, this is just my opinion, we're a smaller district now, and I would look at the rule as far as the vote, when to accept the budget or not. Somehow it doesn't seem fair that another town can dictate to another town how much you can afford to spend. So I would look at things like making that all towns have to accept it or the budget fails. And the reason I think is that that would make it so that the school board, the school committee would have to work with all the towns to try to get a good budget. Right now, they know if they work with Northfield and Leyden, they don't have to worry about Bernardston or vice versa, because you only need 2 towns to pass it. So that's one of the things I'd look at. And there's definitely other language in there as well. Who serves on the school committee? What's their affiliation with the school? That type of thing. How many do we have a fair representation of people involved in the school and people not involved in the school? And I don't think that's the case right now. It could be, but I don't, my opinion. So I think we really need to have a meeting with the heads to really sit down and see what we want. The thing that upsets me sometimes when I think about it is that we had this process almost done with the Hearts Committee. They spent years working on it. They had a consultant group work on it with them, and that process was kind of like shoved away. So I think we need to have more input, and I don't think we had the input this time. That's my opinion.
Anybody else?
Jane?
Thank you. I can't, you'll have to shout at me, I can't see you.
Oh, okay, I'll shout, yeah. So, when I got Stan's letter, I was in complete agreement to what he had to say. The last I checked, I believe it is the towns that fund the school system, unless it's some other way, I'm not really sure, but I believe it is the towns that fund it. So this is an agenda that should be working off of our schedule. I don't believe it should be working off of the school's schedule. I felt really rushed. I don't like to feel rushed. We're looking at a document that hasn't changed in a long time, and our people need a chance to digest it. I wrote a letter, which the paper picked up on as well. That was something very similar to what Stan wrote. And I just felt like, just based on what was on their scheduled posted timeline, which was on their website, was a lot different than what we were being told. It's a huge gap of time that's different, and this is supposed to all occur until like the month of March or within a very short time frame, and it's just not workable because the schedules that we have involving meeting finance committee and getting town meeting and getting all of that stuff squared away, it's just not enough time for a lot of individuals in our municipalities to digest this information. Especially those who are not necessarily educated in being able to read these documents the way they're supposed to be read. It's very policy heavy. And we have all sorts of wealth of knowledge of people who are going to be reading this who, can understand it and some can't understand it. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about it for now. We just need more time. I think there's a general consensus that that we're attacking or making other committees upset. I mean, we're all elected officials here. If you can't handle being criticized, then you don't belong being an elected official. This is the game that we're all in, and we accept that when we choose to sign up to be an elected official. And it's not fun. We've all been there. So we all have disagreements. We're all going to have disagreements, especially when it involves money. And if you can't handle it, don't be involved with it then. Just do something else with your time. Volunteer somewhere else. I'm sorry, but that's just how I feel about it. The amount of times that I've been criticized for decisions that I've made over 6 years is absolutely incredible. It's absolutely incredible, but I'm still here. And a lot of other people who have been criticized are still here as well. So if you can't handle it, then I'm sorry to tell you, but at the end of the day, we're giving the money here. And And that's just something that has to be recognized, and it's a variable that always should be considered. Who is accountable to who is funding this, and ultimately, you know, what the end result is. And I think it's about the kids at the end of the day. But sometimes it seems like our politics and playing the victim seems to be a little bit of a stronger point that we like to make. So that's all I'll say for now.
Ginger?
I don't have a comment because I don't have the district agreement. Were you emailed do you have the district agreement? Do you have it? Do you have it? We don't even have it. No one emailed us.
I don't think the
I don't
draft's
have
ready
it.
yet.
I don't have it. You don't have it. No one has it. So that's why I have no
Okay,
comment.
so my suggestion then is that if there are important comments that anybody wants to make tonight, we should make them, but we should set up a separate meeting for discussing this and only this. And I guess the only decision around that is, does it want to be this whole group, or does it want to be, as Stan suggested, just the chairs of the select board and finance committees? And that's a question. Yes.
So I think there's a lot of work to be done among all the groups, not just the boards and committees, but also the school committee and their committees. I just want to point out, to be fair, having gone to a lot of budget hearings and school committee meetings at different points over the last year, there was some pressure put on the school committee to get going with the district agreement, which they did. And I appreciate the effort. I think the concern came about with respect to the schedule and how the towns work together. And from what I understand, we have not had one of these meetings since prior to COVID,
Right.
right? So we all need to get the wheels going. What I would like to take a look at, and this is not all tonight, I just want to put my topics out there for the process going forward, is I would like to have a similar discussion about enrollment, such as...
I'd like to keep this discussion strictly to
Yep.
this document and what we want to do with that. And
Yeah.
any other things we'll take up
Gotcha.
within the agenda.
Okay. And governance is one of the areas that I would like to take a look at. We've had a tradition of people running for the entire district. I would like to take a look at aligning those positions on the school committee with the annual town elections, and not having people have to run for an entire district, but run for their town position on the school committee. I would like to take a look at that. I'd also like to take a look at the capital expense language and make sure the finance committees are all comfortable with some of the language that was used in the draft one that I saw from this year. And then I'd like to make sure that there's a financial schedule established over the year for communication between the school committee and the various select boards and finance committees. And maybe this is where this body could play a role as well. That's not currently specified in the district agreement. So those are my topics, and I agree, I think we just need to figure out how to move the process forward and establish a schedule.
Anybody else? Steve?
Yes, I would like to see in our future discussions a greater review of what we can afford vis-a-vis what we've always done in the past. Several towns within the districts, the demographics are changing, and I don't think it's responsible to buy in to exorbitant fees that will put any of the towns behind the 8 ball. The well is not bottomless. There's a certain sanguinity now of what we can afford. We're not in 2000 or what have you, we're now. And I read that, and I've listened to the school administration justify large raises and that's
But-
all well and good. We can't afford it. I
We
want
need to keep the discussion to
Okay,
this
I want to
document.
see our emphasis include some rational appreciation for the town's ability to pay. Not what we've always paid, but what we, going forward, what we can.
Okay. Anybody else? Dan?
Yeah, I just suggested, basically, since not everybody has the agreement, that we get that agreement, write down any questions we might have, come back and discuss that only. And if they want to have just a finance committee and select board, that would be fine with me, if you want more than one. But I think that we have to have a better understanding of what it is before we can actually go on and discuss anything further tonight as far as the agreement.
Everybody agree with that?
Yep.
Sarah?
Yeah.
Hi. Speaking of rationality, I couldn't agree more about making sure that we can, we do what we can afford before we do what we're gonna spend. That's common, home economics. But I really, I also agree with B. I think that makes so much sense, aligning the school board elections with the town elections, right? So it's everything happening at once. I think that's respectful of our citizens' time and attention. And I'm a big proponent of representation. So I really like the idea of the towns electing each their representatives, their positions that they're allotted on the board. I don't know, again, respectfully, I don't know how realistic it is to ask for someone who's from one town to go kind of campaigning across all the towns. I think it makes really good sense for them to campaign in their town to represent their town. One confusion that I have is that I think is about the draft, because I think there's supposed to be a final draft, and I was confused when there was an email exchange, and I was confused by it because I was confused who's supposed to provide the final draft. So if the school is supposed to say, hey, this is what we suggest, and then we're supposed to all edit it, that's one situation. If we're supposed to say, hey, this is what we want, and then we go back and forth with the school, that's a different thing. And I was confused by which one of those we were doing, because we don't have a committee, we don't have a subcommittee that's writing up a school thing that's going to present it. So I was under the impression that the school did that, and then we get out our red pens and cut it apart. And let's see, there's one other thing. So that would mean that we were all also working from, that one document. Because I know that we got a draft, but it was from a while ago. So I don't think that we might not even, the folks who have seen the document, I mean, I saw a draft.
All right, I think if I can interrupt.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think what we should start with is to ask the chairman of the committee who is working on this for the school committee to get all of us the current draft of the document.
I think that's rational.
All right, Michelle?
Yep.
I have an
Okay.
extra copy here.
No.
I'm more than willing to read
That is
it.
not the current one.
I just printed it off.
Fine. We're going to get it from the committee that's been working on it. And I want to point out that while nobody might currently remember the history, here's the document that the Hart Committee presented to the school committee and said, give us your comments. That was in February 20th, 2019. This is their comments. So they did work from this. I spent a whole night going through line by line by line. And that's what they worked with. They've forgotten that in the course of time, that that's what they started with. But that is what they started with. So if we can get the current, and are you finished working? Is your committee finished working?
We are not.
So we would like to have the current draft, and then we would like to have any subsequent corrections or drafts that you come up with, so that we know that we're not spinning our wheels. All right, and Stan wants to comment.
I don't think we're spinning our wheels. Appreciate the work the school committee's done on trying to roll this thing forward. I think it's been the process, I think the process is wrong. So now if we have a group that works on it, at some point, we need to tie in the school committee back into that group so we're all on the same page. But I just think the process was wrong in the beginning.
Okay, so I guess the only other part of that question is setting up a meeting, a time to meet.
B is a question too.
It's just is there a way, I have like a printed copy of the original, the Hart document, but is there a way to get out a soft copy to everyone as well, just so we can see what the thinking was in 2019? And I'm just going to point out.
What do you mean by a soft copy?
Oh, a digital copy.
A digital copy?
Yeah, sorry. For those who like to look at all
I know.
the flavors, so to speak.
I would suggest if you have one on your, that you can print out, you could give to your board members and stuff, then like Bernardston, we can do the same thing here.
Okay.
And
As long as
you must
everybody
have a
has
copy
one.
of the, you could give to the Leyden folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Probably somewhere.
I don't know if there's any on, I don't know that I have a one on my computer of the Hart.
I'll find
And I
it.
don't know if the school
I'll find it.
has one, and I don't know if Michelle was the chairman of that Hart committee, if she has saved one someplace in her archives.
Oh, you,
I have it.
oh, okay, thank you.
So maybe you would send that out. And speaking of that, I'm gonna pass a sheet around. I know most of you signed in when you came in the door. But if we could have name, affiliation, email address, phone number if you're willing to share it, so that we can stay in communication, that would be helpful. Thank you.
You mentioned planning a date.
Right. Let me ask another question. Is Thursday night good for everybody?
Depends on what Thursday.
You're all here, so must be.
I don't know. For the most part.
It's, so, it's kind of hard to set up a date when we don't have the documents in our hands yet. So if you will trust Brian and me, we will set something up no sooner than a month from today. And we will time our choice based on when we get those two documents in our emails. Fair? Okay? Okay, if there's nothing else on that, then I'd like to move on to the facilities master plan. And I don't know who wants to speak to that first, or if anybody wants to.
This is a good time for people to speak up or just having a conversation. If you've got concerns, this is why we're having this meeting, so we can talk about it and point it out there. Dan, I'm not for it. Okay, there is reasons, and I have to have more information. Top one, I don't believe our town can afford the price of a new complex, point blank. Even if we vacated our school and we could do something else to that, we wouldn't have the money to do something else with our school after you got done paying $20 or $25 million for a new building. So I just don't think the cost is something that we can afford to do. So that's my opinion. But please join in and let's talk about it.
I have to address the issue because I was involved with several of those meetings of the facility master plan, those public meetings that there was held up at the high school, along with B. Jock was there from the Northfield Select Board. Dave McCarthy, I believe, has attended some of those also from our finance committee. The biggest concern, and I addressed that several times, was the cost involved in looking at such a project, I think is not feasible or affordable. Northfield's facing several large potential projects, things we have to deal with, everything from, emergency services. We still don't know if there's going to be any responsibility for the town concerning the sewer district replacement of any of the facilities there. We're hoping to get grants and various other funding for that. But there's several major issues our town is facing. Potentially an EMS facility, regional. So I think that the town does not have the financial wherewithal. We have not seen serious economic growth in our town. Our population is there's been no real growth in that. And I think that it just simply is not affordable. Especially the other cost would be is that if we did close our school, we would be faced with the cost of trying to maintain it. We can't just simply abandon it. It would probably take several years or longer to redevelop it. So we would have to bear the cost of maintaining it, heating it, securing it, insuring it, if possible. And they make it sound like it's an easy thing, and if you got the school building authority saying covering 60%, it's a $100 million project. 3 of our towns cannot, carry $40 million in debt. And I honestly also don't think our citizens, they rejected a emergency services building in our community that was $13 million, and there is just no way in hell they're going to afford a school project of that magnitude.
Anybody else? B? Ken, did you have your hand up?
You did?
No.
Well, there's 2 aspects to that, and one is the new building proposal, but the other one was the assessment, which is I think where we were I know Bernie and I were kind of focused on before the process got started, is what was needed and what the anticipated expenses were with the existing buildings. So I think there needs to be a subgroup of this group that actually goes through that and takes a look and determines what else we need to do with the schools over what time period, so we know what that cost is if we're not going for a new building. And I know in Northfield we've put about $1 million within the last 5 years or so, or less actually, on the elementary school. So we're a little concerned about, similar to what all the finance committees do, is when somebody's putting up a capital plan, is where you're going to have your hits over the course of the years.
Every place if you build that.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Sarah.
Sarah?
So I agree that I think we need a triage list, right? We need a list that says when something's going to go and when it's going to need to be replaced and how much it costs in order to compare it. We gotta, again, we have to do what we can afford. And, if that triage list were to match somehow the expenditure of a new building, then that would be a deeper discussion. But we don't know that, as B said, we need to get the binder out and look at it. I don't share Bernie's concern about what to do with the elementary school, because there's so many cool things that we could put in there. But I don't think that, again, I think we need to look at it more carefully, bit by bit, line by line, and find out what the costs are in a comparison. The argument that I've heard for the big project for the going forward is that it's a multi-year process, and if you don't put it out there, then the money won't come. But I think that the differential between the grant money that's available specifically for the building, the 60%, and the amount that the towns would be left with, to me, doesn't seem realistic.
I think the 40 million that you mentioned is what the towns would be left with.
Right, yeah, that's
And
worrisome amount.
since I jumped in here, I disagree with you about the elementary schools. The costs of refurbishing them into anything is into the millions, in my opinion. Yeah, it's fine. You look at the school and you say, oh, turn it into senior housing, which is what happened to the grammar school I went to, which, believe it or not, is still standing, and it is now senior housing. But the amount of money that that town spent 25 years ago in turning that into senior housing is astronomical compared when you adjust it for the economy today. We can't afford that either, along with everything else. So when you're talking 40 million for the school district to have a nice new high school, you're talking another, what do you want to go, 5 million? For each of us to do our elementary buildings. And then we have every other department and every other need to consider. You have a sewer district you want to bring up to date. There's lots of people in Bernardston that wish they had a sewer district. The water district. I could go on, and you don't want to hear me because it's lecturing to the choir. Anybody else?
I have. Since I have the ability to see the population and how it is growing or not growing, and the fact that we're having less and less students going to the high school, it's almost going to be cheaper for us to tuition kids out than it is to have a high school. So it's getting close to that realization. And I hate to see that happen because all my kids went through the high school. All of them were graduates. All of them are doing extremely well in the private sector. But there is going to be a time that we are going to have to take a deep thinking in how we are going to support our kids. And if it means that we have this humongous school that has less than 300 kids in it, by the way, that school was built to hold 700 kids. And we will not fill that whatsoever in the next few years. I am seeing a little bit of an increase in population in Northfield. The last couple of years, we've had 25, 26 kids born in Northfield, but that's not going to come along for quite a while. We have stagnated. Northfield has had a population of about 3,000 for about 100 years, so we're not going up any further. What we are doing is we're seeing our population getting older. So you're seeing less kids going through the system, and again, it could get to the point where it might be cheaper for the town in Northfield, maybe the other towns, to think about tuitioning their kids to other schools. It might end up being cheaper that way.
We've had that discussion here.
Yeah.
And it may come back. I mean, if you're looking at a $40 million project and coming out of it, and other projects that are coming out of the taxpayers' pockets, it would be a hard pill to swallow when they are underutilizing the school as it is now. And they have to come to justification as to why they need this, why is it important to do this, and is there an alternative? And like I'm thinking, it may come to that.
Ginger down there.
Ginger?
Yeah, the $40-50 million loan for these towns is it's an absolute no-go. I couldn't even, to me, it would be a waste of time to even put it on my agenda, frankly. I understand the maintenance of older facilities. I understand there maybe we need maybe there is a reason for new school facilities in the northern part of this county somewhere. And I think, to me, it seems like we are going to have two ideas that are going to fail. This is my concern. This is what I'm worried about. We're going to have a facilities plan at PVRC that is going to fail. We're going to have a 6-town, I fear this, we're going to have a 6-town regional group that is going to fail. And I worry that both of these ideas are going to fail because they're not taking into consideration working together at a larger facilities plan that includes 6 towns, 8 towns, 10 towns, 12, 19. I did give the six-town regional group a little bit of a hard time in a meeting, hopefully respectfully. I appreciate the work that everyone is doing, but I don't want to see both of these plans fail. It might be reasonable to put up money for a new school, but not for 3 towns to pay for, and not for 4 towns to pay for, and probably not for 5 to pay for. If you're talking 6 towns, then, and it's something that's beneficial for the kids, then maybe that's something that we can consider. So I hope that, my hope is that the 6-town regional group and PVRSD can put your best minds together and figure out something that's going to be the most cost-effective facilities plan for the towns and the best education for the kids. So I just please work together and yeah. Anyway, that's it. But the loan for just this facility, it's a no-go, completely.
Anybody else? Dan?
Just to add to that, within the next 8 to maybe 10 years, the tech school is going to be looking for a new facility, and that's going to come through too. So you're not talking 40 million, you're talking 40 million plus all these other things that are going to be on the table for every single town. So this is a great group of people to get together and look at, you know, what are the priorities, what can we do to do this. We can't do it alone. I don't think the 3 towns can actually take this and do it alone. I think we have to look for state and federal and more communities to help out. One thing that happens when you don't have the population, you don't have the arts, you don't have the sports, you don't have all of these other areas that you really want your kids to have, and we're losing that. It's just getting to be a very great burden on individual towns. And I think what we have to do, and this is a great start, is we have to get more towns involved, and we have to look at a bigger region in order to maybe help each other out. And that's not just in schools. I think that's in all of the facilities, all of the things that each town, fire, police, EMTs, everything has to be looked at, I think, as a regional thing, because we're getting too small, population is getting too old, we're not bringing population into the area. They'd rather be towards the cities because they can do more, the younger group of people. So you got to have something to entice people to come back, and I don't think higher taxes is going to be a thing to do it.
Gee, that's too bad. Be easy to do higher taxes.
Yeah.
What I would like to do, unless there is,
Just
yes,
one small comment.
sure. Erica.
To your point, we actually did a quick analysis about tuitioning kids from Leyden. There's between 55 and 60 kids total.
Yep.
And it actually came out much higher than what we would pay right for the FY 2025 budget. So that was a bit disheartening. But again, we don't have a school anymore. That was closed. So, you know, for Northfield and Bernardston, it may make more sense. It does for Warwick a little bit because they have a school. Second, the MSBA money isn't guaranteed at 60%. So what if they decide, maybe we're only going to give you 40%? So all of a sudden, the bond in each town cranks up. So for Leyden, there is no economic growth.
It goes back to we need help from everybody as far as
exactly. No, I'm getting it. Hang on one second.
Yeah.
I'm almost done. I totally think that regionalization, a larger region, is going to be necessary in almost every public services, schools, the whole shebang. So yes, I agree with both of you guys. And B, to your point, in this facilities master plan, they also talk about a $40 million fee over the next 10 years for the existing schools that we have. So that to me is also kind of a kick in the shins, because you're looking at $40 million kind of either way, and the plans are over 10 years, for whether it's for a new school or for an existing school. So looking at that and making sure that that's actually accurate is going to be key. But again, $40 million between 3 towns is a big ticket item.
No, I was agreeing with you 100%. I just didn't realize about the tuition, which thank you very much for that.
I'd like to make a suggestion that we each go back and study this. I mean, Bernardston received a book that did not include Northfield, so we don't have any idea what they said about your school.
Yes,
For the,
the book in the town office has all three.
that has all three?
Right now.
Okay. The one that I got, that got delivered to me only had BES and PVRS, so I stand corrected. Anyway, I'd like to suggest that we look at our own town's building and see how close this is to our evaluation of what needs to be done and a timeline on it. And we all look at the high school the same way, and then we'll put this back on the agenda for a deeper discussion in the future. And so your homework is to do that, and then when you're ready to meet, to let Brian or me know that you think you've done all your homework that you can do and you're ready to sit down and do this again. I know we all have time for these extra projects. Especially me. So if we can move on to the sixth town, and we kind of merged into that a little bit with Ginger's recent discussion, but Stan?
Yeah, sixth town regional planning. I kind of agree with the lady over here that said that I don't believe either one of them are going to make it. But saying that, we had a discussion yesterday talking about maybe we don't need to be in a district anymore. Maybe we can pull out a district, keep our elementary school and just tuition our kids out. But thinking about that, maybe the thing that we should be looking at is instead of a six-town regional planning board that we know is too hard to get going right now, maybe we should look at just combining administration offices. So we're paying less administration costs. Our administration cost is ridiculous for the amount of kids that we have. Plain ridiculous. Who would ever hire people at that kind of money for the kids we have? I don't know. But maybe that's another way to look at it for the time being, for the short term. And then have the longer term plan would be to look at, like you said, a bigger region and that type of thing. But we need to do something now because we need to get some of the costs down. We can't afford $5 million for 600 kids for administration. That's ridiculous.
Anybody else?
If I may?
Yeah.
I participated in the six-town regional planning board. And what worries me is that in all our meetings, PVRS has never been officially participative because the school committee has not voted to participate. So how are we talking about a six-town regional district when one of the towns is not participating?
It's not a town that's not.
An entity.
It's an entity in itself. And I'll go back to what I said before. I'm retired, I'm 78. I'll be 79 in 3 weeks. I love my town, but it's becoming outrageously expensive. Every year, taxes can't keep on going up to pay for fewer and fewer students, which take 60 cents out of every dollar of our available discretionary funding. Where's the break-even point? 40 million? There's no way.
Okay,
Let me say one more thing on this.
what?
I know this is being broadcast and stuff. I want people to understand it. We're not against educating our kids. That's our obligation. That's what we have to do. We just got to find a smart way to do it. When I say I'm I'm against the administrative budget, yes, I am. I'm not against the school budget, the rest of it. I think what they've done is a good job of putting together the curriculum for our children the best they can. And I wish there was more we could give to them. But it's a cost thing, and we're talking about retirements. And we have to take some of that, the feeling out of us and discuss the hard things and the facts. And I think that's where we're at tonight, but we're not against. I don't want the media to think, or anybody else, that this group is against educating our children and giving them the best education that we possibly can. They deserve that from us. That's all I want to say.
Absolutely. Anybody else? Sarah?
So in looking over the 6-town plan, independent of the educational benefit, for Northfield, every plan that I saw cost Northfield more money than we're currently paying. And I didn't see, and I may have missed it, but I didn't see anything that talked about the transportation, which is going to be a huge expense. So I think in order to be able to actually compare apples to apples, compare what we're going to be asked to spend, we have to have those numbers. So I would suggest before any other consideration that all the numbers get put in the pile. And that would include transportation, which is a really, I would anticipate, with everybody traveling all directions, that could be a relatively sizable amount.
I sat on that committee for a number of years. And the subcommittee I sat on dealt with finances. And we had transportation studies done, and we had transportation projections for costs. And I'm sorry you didn't see them.
Well, I came to that
But
meeting where they had the multiple spreadsheets, and I didn't see that in them, so, right?
Well, they had several public hearings, and the public hearings addressed different aspects, which is kind of, and I talked to them about this, so I'm not saying anything out of school. In hindsight, they wish they had covered parts of everything, and each meeting concentrated on one area but included the other parts. So if you missed a meeting, then you missed one section. But I know how hard that committee worked, and I know what you're saying about the projections. My comment to that committee at the time was, you're projecting what this district is going to cost if it's created, and then you're comparing that to what we're paying now. But you didn't project the current districts up to that level. So it wasn't, to me, it wasn't apples to apples. Yes?
I went to quite a few of those planning meetings and I actually stood up and asked the question about transportation, and the answer I got was that it was going to be hard for them to predict how many kids they were going to have to bus from the Vernon town line down to Turner's Falls or from the Montague-Sunderland town line up to Pioneer, just because they simply don't know how many kids were there. So it doesn't sound to me like they projected anything very well.
Well, I'll get you the transportation study. I have a copy of it home.
That's
if you want to call me up.
In the meeting, though, that's what I'm saying, and I haven't actually seen any documents, and I went to quite a few of those meetings myself, and I've asked these questions, and I haven't really gotten any clear answers on it.
Well, it is hard to predict that.
Yeah.
And I'm not being defensive for that committee. But if they take the population that we have today in the schools and say, okay, we're going to pick a kindergartner up on this corner and a first grader up on that corner and 3 third graders over here, by the time the school is there, there's not going to be a kindergartner and a first grader and a third grader. So the transportation plan won't be effective.
But then you have to plan for the worst, and that's the most money you're gonna have to spend. I mean, if
Well,
we're gonna
I
try and
think-
sell everybody on this big district that's gonna cost a lot of money, you gotta justify it 100%. We have to predict absolutely everything so we can judge everything out. And if you don't have those, then the homework hasn't been done.
Okay. Alan's here, so he's hearing what you're saying, and he'll get back to you.
I think we have those guys, so maybe we can talk.
Anything else on the 6th town? Ginger?
Yeah, I mean, I guess again, I don't want to see it fail. I don't want to see the 6th town fail. I've been wanting this since I started getting involved in this in Leyden. We've talked so much about regionalizing. here's this group doing.
Ginger, will you address this group?
Yeah,
and
sorry.
then-
I just don't, I don't wanna see it fail, and I think in order to have it any chance at all of working, it has to take the town's finances into consideration. We all know that we're not gonna go into this agreement knowing that it's gonna right off the bat costing us more money. And I'm not saying it is, I think there's a long way to go with this. But I would just, again, urge everyone to work together, come up with a very comprehensive facilities plan that involves all the schools and all the towns. Get more towns in here if we can. I want a county school system. I want one administrative.
I didn't pay her.
Staff. We just happened to agree on this by chance. So maybe this is. I just don't want to see it fail, but I think it's going to if it's not more comprehensive. And I know you have time, so I keep hope
Well, the
alive.
point they're at now is developing a district agreement.
Yes.
And some of these things will have to come within the development of that district agreement.
Oh, Jane.
Okay.
Just one other comment on that. My earlier comment on enrollment was, I think we're doing kind of a one-size-fits-all with middle school and high school. And when we look at the numbers, as the discussion that you all in Bernardston had with PBRS last week, there's fewer students in the high school level. The middle schools seem to be fine. I mean, consistent, and then they're dropping off and they're choosing to go elsewhere, including PBRS. So I agree with Ginger, because to me, we're looking at agreements when we haven't fully spec'd out the larger root issue. And is it solved in a different way using all the information that PVRS has put together and all the information that the 6 towns has put together? So I would kind of erase the word fail in that we're all working on the same problem, but we're kind of heading down these paths of doing 2 agreements, which might not actually solve what we're concerned about with respect to where students go, particularly in 9th and above, and how much it costs, and how the towns can actually manage the amount of money associated with buildings, plural. You know what I mean? So the old ones, the new ones, to Ginger's point, look at the tech school. It's like 19 towns or something, and that seems to work. Maybe the answer is there's another county. To your point, there's another county high school, or there's just a different creative solution that hopefully the state will let you do. I think part of the challenge for everyone in this room, audience and those at the table, is we have to get not underneath, but we're guided, so to speak, by the state. And I think sometimes that sets up these solutions that, and you go down a path where it just doesn't quite feel right. You know what I mean? That's why I was pulling back on the agreement schedule, is I'm not sure all the questions have been answered before going into an agreement.
Anybody else? Yes.
B brought up the issue of enrollment, and that's where our finance committee and also the B from the select board, we were surprised at the numbers when we looked at it. At Northfield only had 45 students at the high school this year, and some of the classes had only 8. Another one had only 7 students in it, and we were a little surprised, and also we were surprised at the tremendous drop off from 8th grade to 9th grade, which was over 50% decline in students from who are going to other schools. But the concern was too, we also sent 40 Northfield students to Franklin Tech. So the other option, I'm not saying about the high school, I think we should that should be an issue too to look at the future, is do we continue 9th through 12th grade? The numbers are getting so small that maybe we should think in the future of a K through 8, and then potentially tuition the high school students out of the district. because that is where the numbers are declining precipitously. And the numbers are so small. I mean, like I said, that's all we have is 45 students in the high school from Northfield. We have to deal with that eventually. I mean, how small are the numbers gonna get till we finally decide what we're gonna do about it? But I think that's something we need to think about.
Anybody else?
I'll just make the point again, I've said this quite a few times, but as far as the administrative costs that were supposedly gonna be saved on the 6-town regionalization, combining administrators and asking them to do more work. I've talked to a lot of people about this, administrators who work in those schools now, and that idea does not sound appealing, and I'm one of them. I just don't see that being feasible to ask people to do 3 or 4 more schools on top of the workload that they currently have for the same amounts of salary. I don't think that's a sustainable model either. So something to consider when everybody's talking about the savings that it's gonna provide to the school districts by combining everybody and having cutting administrators, but you're basically gonna ask a food service director to take on 3 more schools and a facilities director to take on 3 more schools and superintendents and business directors and everything. And from the colleagues that I work with, nobody's in favor of that.
I appreciate your comments, but I definitely have to disagree with that one.
You don't work in a school.
Yeah, I don't work in a school, but I also read a lot of reports and stuff, and most districts, they have well over 1,000 kids. So there comes a point where you're not gonna need more people for, say, up to 1,500 kids, but after 1,500 kids, maybe you have to add somebody. We don't know where that point is. We do know, or we do, at least I think we know, is that the point we're at right now, we have too few kids for what we're paying and the amount of administrators we've got. I've talked to previous guidance counselors at PBRS when they used to only have 4 people in the administrative office. Now they have, what, 11, I think, to somebody was telling me? That's ridiculous. We really need to look at that, and the school committee really needs to look at that to fix that problem. That's why I said maybe combine them. But that's just my opinion, Keith, that's all.
Yeah, I mean, from a food service director or facilities director standpoint, it doesn't matter how many kids are there, it's how many buildings you have to manage, and I'm already on 5 buildings, adding 3 more, it's just not feasible. So,
Well, some things may not be across the board.
right, but
And that would
going
be
to
an
the opinions
about,
of the people who are already doing those jobs, the people that I work with, I'm just saying it's not
And-
something that's appealing to a lot of people already in those jobs.
well, nobody wants more work, even if they maybe don't have a full day's work
Exactly.
to do now. Sorry, but that's my opinion. Anybody else on this subject?
I think you have an interesting point, and to Jane's point there, every position needs to be looked at comprehensively. It's not just, we're gonna have one of everything across the board. And also, and I'm sorry, I don't know what you do, but let's say facilities director, and there are 5 schools, and there are 5 facilities directors. It doesn't mean that if you only went down to 1, that salary would remain static. That doesn't make any sense. So you're removing 4 salaries, but you're increasing the workload, therefore you're increasing the salary and benefits as well. So I don't think it's about, making sure that the salary remains static. But again, it's looking at every administrative position one by one and having a real understanding of the actual workload, the number of schools, the number of kids, the number of facilities, all of that. So that's what needs to be looked at, and whether it's the school committee or us, I don't even know who does that, to be honest, but it's something that does need to be looked at.
So 2 rebuttal points on that though, is that salaries were listed on one of the original plans, and it didn't look like salaries would be increasing as far as some of the people that I'm concerned of.
I don't think that's
But I don't
legitimate.
think, what's that?
I don't think that's legitimate. It's ridiculous to increase the workload by 5 and
Well,
not
and-
include the
And
salary.
then again, it goes back to my earlier comments, then that effective plans were not laid out so far for us to look at this and say this is a great idea. Because so far, these are things I'm just pointing out that are not good ideas. The other part is I don't think you can pay certain people enough money to take on more responsibilities than what they're doing already, because they're already doing 50, 60 hours a week. How much are you actually expecting people to work for these increases in pay? And how much are we actually saving if we're then increasing more money? I know we're cutting administrators, but we're now talking about throwing more money at this problem again, and that just seems to be the answer. So
Again, it needs to be looked at position by position. So
Right.
yeah, I think we're actually kind of agreeing.
Okay, Ginger, and I saw a hand over here too.
No.
I mean, I guess, most of the country have very large countywide school districts. They have 10, 15, 20 schools in a county. They manage to hire people to take care of those facilities. They manage to hire administrators. They manage to hire superintendents for 10, 15, 20 schools. So I don't think that we would have any problem with that. Compensation would adjust, people would be laid off, maybe, but those people do that all over the place. So I think you would figure it out.
Okay. Dan, did you?
No, I was just pointing because she was.
Oh, okay. Steve?
Yeah, I look at the unit cost per student of our administrative unit cost, and it's outrageous. And I'm a former retired healthcare administrator, and you can't justify huge salaries for a decreasing population because it becomes untenable. And our administrative costs are outrageous. We're one of the highest in the Commonwealth. And it's got to end because we can't afford it. It's no different than trying to maintain $40 million for a new building, what have you. It's completely out of whack. And the justification for saying that to get good people we have to pay this is rubbish.
Okay, anybody else on the sixth town, which is the subject of this? I want to say one thing about the sixth town, and then I won't let anybody else say anything else. When the committee was first formed and we first started seeking information from the two school districts, both Gilmontague and Pioneer Valley provided lots of information, and they had people on staff that attended every meeting. And someplace along the line, PVRS decided we're not going to participate no matter what the people in the town said they wanted to do. We're not participating. And that still leaves me cold to think that they ignored all of us who voted to look into a six-town district, and they wouldn't cooperate. So having said that, I'd like to move on to the PVRS FY25 budget, if anybody wants to have any. What? Oh, no, the budget is not.
Budget's not on here.
It says school resource officer.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
I'll make a comment on that if you want.
sure.
I'll start like started all the other ones. This is one that's really got me confused as an old person. I really don't understand all the problems with the school resource officer. I would think that we would want our children to learn that the police officer is a good thing to have around. The police officer is somebody they can look up to, respect. The police officer is somebody they can go and ask for help. Instead, we're teaching them something altogether different. Stay away from them. Don't go near them. I think that is wrong. Police officer is, they're not your friends all the time if you're doing something wrong, but boy, when you need some help, they're there to help you. And I think we need to really look at that, or maybe make me understand why we're so against having a school resource officer. I'm sorry, that's way.
Jane.
Oh, boy. Okay, let's go this way.
I'm going to plead for this position one more time, and I've done this before in front of my select board. I've done it in front of the school committee. And now that I have you all in the room, I'm going to make my case one more time. So, to the school committee that briefly discussed this at their meeting at 6 o'clock, this is not about psychology. It's about pragmatic safety and education for our students. And let's first start out with the word here, school resource officer. Resource, they're a resource for the students. They are a rapport and a connection building relationship that exists between an individual in a leadership role and a student who is developing their mind to maybe eventually become a leader someday and to get educated. Okay? One of the biggest points of a school resource officer is to keep children out of the criminal justice system. That's their job. That's what they do. It's not their job to make arrests. And I think a lot of times there's this terrible notion that exists with law enforcement in society today that there is just this, that you throw the cuffs on and take them to the prison, and that's not how criminal justice works. That's not how school resource officers work. Chapter 71, Section 37P is a very distinct chapter that is specifically designed to have a consultation between the police chief and the superintendent of the school to craft an MOU and a policy that works specifically for that institution. That is a document that that the officer is expected to be held accountable by, and that both parties are agreeing that they will all work together to make happen for their district. So when I show up to a school committee meeting and see guidance counselors and individuals connected to the school system talking about what this position is doing in other parts of the country where a law enforcement model cannot possibly relate because of the fact that law enforcement is different in other parts of the country, is the most uneducated argument that can be made. First of all, when it comes to law enforcement, each state has their own standards and accreditation of what is required for you to police a police officer in this state. And I know that the peace officer standards training has gotten a lot of scrap from this end of the state because a lot of people, including myself, sometimes Boston doesn't always understand how Western Mass does things, including their law enforcement practices. Okay, so but Massachusetts has some of the best training standards of what they expect with their law enforcement officers and with their accountability practices. That's what they do. This is 2024. Policing doesn't work like it did in the 1950s. We're above that. We're beyond that now. You hire educated individuals to educate our students, and Northfield PD had somebody ready for that. I took lots of time out of my life. Heath took lots of time out of his life. The police chief took time out of his life. We're all parents. We are all invested in the safety of our kids. And we all know this is a very serious issue because of what we see that happens in our society. And it hits you differently when you become a parent, the way it has hit me differently in the past few years. So that's why I'm also passionate about this situation and about the negligence that the school committee unfortunately has given this when we have had resource officials in the past that have worked in the school. Now, there have been a lot of additional calls that have happened as a result of incidents that have occurred at the school. And when you have an individual threatening a certain body, a certain person in the school, there was a police cruiser hanging outside the school. When we need when we're in trouble, all of a sudden, then we'll pay money to have a cruiser sit in front of the school. And I think that is it's a security protocol, but it's not a long-term result. It's a Band-Aid on a ever-growing wound that we're trying to fix here, and what an MOU is trying to fix, and why this chapter was and is always trying to fix. I'm just going to read a couple of the incidents that have happened at Pioneer. This came from my police chief. This information comes from my police chief. It was emailed to me by my police chief. Investigated report of a school threat, unsubstantiated and believed to be a rumor. Responded to PBRS for a student who left school on foot. Responded to PBRS for a student found with a baggie of an unknown powdery white substance believed to be narcotic. Did not test positive with drug field kits seized for destruction. Responded to PBRS for an escalated custodial issue between two parents at the school. Other calls involving the same student related to mental health. Additional follow-ups, resources provided by the PD to include a co-responder involvement where we use clinical support options now. It's a fantastic program that a lot of our communities are signing on to because police officers are not psychologists. We're expected to be all sorts of things, but we can't be all of them. So that's why these services exist, and that's why they'd be also beneficial to your school. Parent called to report their PBRS student being bullied and was the alleged victim of an A&B in the school. Police responded to PBRS for a report of students reported hearing about a potential statutory rape, investigated and forwarded to the DA's office. Police responded to PBRS for a report of bullying and alleged threats being made by one student to rape another student. Police responded to PBRS for a student found with a baggie of marijuana, contraband seized for destruction. Police responded to Northfield Elementary School for staff dealing with an aggressive guardian of a parent. Police received a phone call from a concerned parent of a student at Northfield Elementary School. Another student brought a bullet to school and was showing it to the students, investigated by the PD. Police received a report of a elementary student allegedly assaulted by a teacher, investigated by the PD, allegedly. Northfield PD also responded to other calls involving students, but outside of the school. When you have officers from our town, speaking of money, we're all big into money. That's what we do here. So we have our officers that we pay out of our tax dollars in our community responding to the school, taking away services and security measures that they are designed to be for their town, for our town of Northfield, to go respond to an incident at the school, which is costing hours of time, hours and hours and hours of time that exists, okay? And they don't have that rapport with the students. There is no support, there's no rapport, there's no relationship building that exists. So naturally and unfortunately, sometimes the criminal justice system comes into play quicker because that officer does not have the understanding that exists based on the incident that occurred or the support that happened or a number of things. And we have offered to pay money to fully fund this position. That's how passionate we are about this in Northfield, and I'm proud to represent that opinion. And I believe the board has represented that opinion many times. And past and present principals have always, also I should say, been in favor of the SRO program. And lastly, what I'll say, God forbid, if a deadly force incident happens and it costs the life of a child or an adult, and the officer was not able to be there because of the result of some bad politics and policy making as a result of the school committee, the responsibility will be falling on that entity who has denied
Mr.
the
Miser,
position.
you can't say that.
Yes.
I
Mr.
just
Miser,
did.
you cannot say that.
I
in a public
just
meeting.
did.
Oh, enjoy yourself. It's telling discredited
Excuse me.
ideas.
No
It's
one-
embarrassing.
Sit down.
You're embarrassing.
You're
our
not part of the
council.
meeting, sit.
Sit.
I'm sitting. I'm being insulted by him. Yeah, enjoy it, buddy.
Okay, that's enough.
I have a question.
Finish. I'm sorry, there was a hand up down here. Ginger?
Yeah, thanks, Jane. You say that an SRO doesn't involve students becoming a part of the criminal justice system. But every study shows that that is not true, that the opposite is true. That if the police officer in a school introduces juveniles into a criminal justice system very early, a system that is a cycle that is very hard to break out of when you start that young. And thank you for laying out every incident where it was perfectly fine and reasonable for an officer to show up at the school. I mean, to me, you just made the point that we don't need an SRO, that the police have no problem showing up when they're called. The school is part of the town. The school is not taking police resources away from the town. The school is a part of the town. The students live in these towns. We fund these police departments to respond to the school when necessary. You cannot tell me, I will only speak to the Bernardston Police Department because we have been lucky to join with them, and that is what I know. You cannot tell me that Chief Palmieri and Sergeant John Richardson, the two officers I know the most, do not know every kid in Bernardston, their family situation, who's having issues, who's having problems, and building those community relationships in the school when they go there and visit, and also at community events and around town. Stan, I agree that kids should have a positive view of police officers, but they don't need to be in the school for that to happen. We're lucky enough to have communities small enough where officers can interact with these kids in multiple ways. And I thank the school committee for having the guts to cut this from the budget. We sit here and tell them money, money, money. They cut a redundant cost, and then now I ask them to put it back in. So thank you for having the guts to cut it, and thank you for having the guts to not continue with this redundant cost. And
Steve?
Alex, I just have one question. Of those incidents at PBRS, not Northfield Elementary, what was the time frame of the 5 or 6? What was the time frame that those 6 covered? A month, 6 months, 3 months?
I think there was 11 calls between September and December. A majority of those were recorded between the start of school and around mid-December.
Yeah, that would be correct, Heath.
Great, they have no problem showing up.
Well, you don't know how our department works in town and how our regional law enforcement model
Hey,
works.
you know, if Northfield wants to pay for it,
We are. We are paying for it.
Great, pay for it. You want to flush
It's
money
out,
down
it's not in their budget, it's in our
Wait a
budget.
minute, let's stay calm, stay calm.
Calm down, calm down. We're having a discussion, we're
Yeah.
talking about things.
I just want to speak of this issue. Yes, Northfield has, because we have an elementary school, we also have the high school or middle school in our town. It is our responsibility to pay for it. It's not yours. When we have maybe one officer on duty and he's tied up at that school for all these calls, where is he protecting the rest of the town? The school committee should have also asked the parents what they thought about this issue instead of making the decision unilaterally on their own. And the other thing too is the cost. If my personal opinion is the schools were originally supposed to pay $30,000 to partner with the SRO with the town of Northfield. We anteed up the other 30. If we're responding to so many calls and taking that staff person off protecting the rest of our citizens, and we should be assessing PBRS for that cost, because that's not unfair for us to solely have to spend those kind of resources.
Well, if I could ask a question about that, and
Yeah.
maybe you might know the person. Of those calls in the 3-month period, you said it was, whatever it was. How many calls in Northfield happened, not including the high school? How many townspeople needed police services on?
That I would ask Chief Hall. Chief Hall, I don't have that information, but it is though, if some of those calls are not something though we can, police officer, I'm a retired police officer. You go up there, it's not like you're gonna be there for 5 or 10 minutes.
Sure.
I have sometimes had to take 2-3 hours or longer, even sometimes the entire shift if I had an incident at a school. So that means I'm not really available to answer other calls. And that's the thing, is some of these, that's, again, I think it's a great idea that Chief Hall should provide, especially to the school committee, all the responses up there to the elementary and especially PVRA, to the high school, and to take how long that officer was there. How many officers were actually on duty for that shift? Was that the person that was a sole officer, or were there 2 officers on duty, and that other officer was available to answer calls? But the thing too is that this school committee, basically, we had an SRO. I haven't heard that there was problems with an SRO program up there. And they partnered with us to pay for it. But now they don't pay a dime. And so we have this still, the responsibility is still there to send the officer up there. And to me, again, if that's a lone officer and he's not protecting the rest of the town, as a taxpayer, that's not fair. And that's why I look at it as a financial issue. But I also believe that the parents of students in the district should have had a say and brought that up, had the opportunity to express that to the school committee.
Right, thank you.
And my point
Keith,
to
you
that-
had your hand up.
Sorry.
So I want to try to respond to a few different things. So first off, my basis of knowledge, 20 years in school safety and security. Last person to hold that job as an SRO full-time at Pioneer. And when I left, I thought I did an excellent job of establishing that it was a much needed thing, because it went beyond arresting any kids. It went into the whole education between drunk driving and being inside constitutional law classes, being there with their life skills classes and shedding the stuff from DARE and actually becoming certified in the level of what their health teachers were teaching kids on substance use, and then working my way into the curriculum through that. Like, doing everything I possibly could to integrate myself in the most beneficial way that school could use me, beyond a person who's going to be there and lock kids up and introduce them to the criminal justice system. That's the actual opposite of what I did. There's a thing called the diversion program, that if you are forced to take a child who is violating a law and you actually have to do something to charge them, you're at the point where you're literally at your last resort, you have to charge them. You can take that child and put them in the criminal justice system but it is before charges would actually adhere to them for their lifetime. You give them the opportunity to take the mistake and make it right, and it doesn't even show up. That's part of what the liaison of a school resource officer does with a child who's going to require the services of the town anyways, and what's going to end up having to inevitably happen with the criminal justice system. But now when a police officer shows up to that school, it is the only interaction these kids are getting with a cop sometimes. And that was supposed to be the complete opposite of what we wanted with integrating a school resource officer in the school. You wanted to develop a relationship. They became everybody's personal cop. They were able to ask questions, humanize the badge. And now every time someone shows up to the school, it's because something bad's going on. That's the only time these kids are interacting with them. So yes, Northfield is sending this person up there, we're floating the bill, we're providing all this stuff, but the point was to have somebody in the school to create the personal relationships so that that prejudice that the school's actually teaching by saying cops are bad, we don't want them in there, we only want them when we're calling them. It was supposed to be a step away from that entire thing. And here we are taking a step backwards in time and teaching these kids that we're going to judge people before we actually know anything about them. This profession that there's kids in the school whose parents are doing the profession, yet they're sitting there watching the leaders in the school and guidance counselors and other people who work there say, we don't want these people in there because they're inherently bad in other places of the country, even though we've had nothing but success with the several people we've had in this school. And when kids who graduated and parents say, the reason why my kid is alive today and graduating is because the influence this person had on their lives. Like, I don't know how you supplement that. But to what Stan asked in the beginning of this subject was, why are we talking about this again? It was because of all the calls. So it was, why are we having a threat to the principal at Northfield Elementary at the end of the school year last year, a threat of murder against that principal, and all these other calls and saying we don't need a school resource officer there. And additionally, why weren't the parents asked? Because we've got this child care thing that the school district is putting out with newsletters and community events and surveys. We have a facilities plan with newsletters, community events and surveys. How many community events, surveys, and newsletters were sent out in the whole process of them deciding they don't want a resource officer? 0. They didn't ask the communities. They didn't ask people what they wanted. They had a couple of people come up, read predetermined things that were against the whole school resource officer thing and why other parts of the country would justify what we're going to do here, not based on the history that we had here. So I'm not sure why we have to keep on discussing this, because if a cop has to get called there from the outside, and God forbid the worst case scenario where someone does bring a weapon into the school, it's a heck of a lot easier to stop what could happen in that worst case scenario from inside the school than have to respond. Those incidents are over in just a matter of minutes. And my son is in that school. That's a price I don't want to pay, and I guarantee if you ask any principal, any teacher, any parent who's in that school, they're going to say the same thing.
Brian, you weren't finished.
I'm sorry, but the whole point I asked the question, to me, I don't think the argument of you're not protecting the rest of the town because they have to respond to Pioneer, it doesn't hold water to me, because if you're responding to something on some road in Northfield and there's an incident at the school, now you're protecting the town over the school. So to me, that doesn't hold water. I understand that there's however many calls there was in that 3-month period, which is why I asked the question, how many calls were police services needed in the rest of Northfield, for example. Because he mentioned, and I think you mentioned also, worst case scenarios, having something bad is happening at that school. What if something bad is also happening on Captain Beers Plain Road, right? Somebody's about to get unalived or whatever the case may be, and you're responding to that. So you understand what I'm saying? That I don't think that argument holds that much water in terms of you can't protect the rest of the town because you're responding to all these calls.
So the thing is, if you have somebody on site, they can deal with that, and we had the other officer on the street. Now we don't have that person on site anymore. So so basically you had 2 officers. Now most of the time you only have 1.
Okay,
So
I see a
what do you
couple of other hands up here.
Okay.
Ginger, I think yours was
Okay,
up first.
Thanks for calling on me again. Kids do not need personal cops. I don't want to pay for that. but
Please don't
people
repeat
don't
anything that you
wanna pay
already
for that.
said.
Okay. There are other people in the schools that can divert kids from poor behavior. School psychologists, teachers, someone in the $5 million administration budget can probably do it. But my point, but the solution to this, maybe, you make a fair point about the calls in Northfield. I'll give you that. Why can't Bernardston Police also respond to calls to even it out? Why can't they also respond to calls at PBRC? Is there a jurisdictional issue?
Jurisdictional issue.
They do respond.
I would
There's
think
such
they
a thing
would,
as
yeah.
mutual aid,
Exactly.
and Northfield responds here when necessary, and we respond there when necessary, and both of us go to other towns.
Yes, I don't see why Bernardston can't also answer.
Well, that's
calls.
assuming that whoever's the officer in
Yeah.
Bernardston is not dealing with something here that he can't leave.
Right. But the likelihood of that happening is not.
Well,
If you're called up to something in Northfield, Bernardston can most likely, I would think, could most likely respond.
Yeah, they would have to request official mutual aid, and if there was an officer available.
Well, that seems like they could probably do that.
Jane, I'd like to request a move on to the next topic. We feel
Okay.
this one.
You think so?
I just wanted to say a couple of points to take the temperature down. On the position would be extra, right? So to assume both police departments have plenty of personnel right now is not correct. There's been a lot of police reform in Massachusetts to the point where it's really hard to get police officers. So we're not talking about lots of extra people to go send elsewhere. Mutual aid is for a specific regional type emergency. The reason from a financial standpoint for the SRO was a fully loaded benefited position would be anywhere from $60,000 to $85,000. The district was paying $30,000, right? For a full-time trained officer, and there's certain certifications and training that they must go through. When they enter the school, they're not in full uniform. They're in a casual uniform, and we also picked up an admin vehicle, so it's not a marked vehicle. And the whole role, as Heath well knows, is to actually work with the educators and the other support personnel, because what happens in school, as we all know, also happens at home. And then what happens at home and happens on the internet comes back to the school. So if you read through the detailed police reports that were redacted, that are the detail behind some of these things, you'll see that some kids have ongoing problems in their families, and those come into the school, and it might involve a police response. And it's better to have somebody who has the training. So if the police response is at home, or if it's at school, then there's a continuity of service and contact with an individual who knows the student and the family well, and also works with, as Alex had pointed out, our CSO person. So I just wanted to point out a few facts about what the intent of the position is. I really don't like when we have to get on total opposite sides, because I think there's a workable solution in the middle, because Northfield is really focused in on community policing. We've taken all of the discussion nationally very seriously, and we've actually moved our police department into community policing. And frankly, most of the phone calls, school kids or otherwise, have to do with mental health. We just had a meeting last night where you can watch our meeting. It was really fascinating on some of the cases. The final thing that I will say is, and I feel strongly about the national things that have happened in those discussions. I think they're valid, but as a select board member, I've had to learn to actually work and learn more about public safety and the ins and outs of it. And I feel very comfortable working with our police force. I've actually gone on a ride-along. I've sat down and read reports in the police office, et cetera, so that I can be more up to speed on what the needs of students and families are.
Thank you.
Sorry, Jane. I'm sorry.
Ken asked to close the discussion on this.
Okay.
So I'm going to respect his request because it's after 8. I guess the other things that we had on the agenda were other things that we might potentially cooperate on. And I just jotted a couple things down. Nobody called me with these, even though I asked if you wanted to add any. So these are my ads. And I put town planner, grant administration, any departments in the towns that we can have more cooperation, or maybe even want to formalize the cooperation, because I know our towns work together on a lot of stuff. So who would like to add anything to that, or?
I will. Again, I will start
Okay,
with that.
Stan.
We've got the opportunity right now to look at our police in all of our communities, to see if there's something that we want to do as far as combining them. Our chief police will probably be retiring in 4 to 5 years. And I believe our sergeant will probably be right behind him. So it's a good opportunity for us to start thinking about how we want to see policing down the road. I know that it's a hard thing. I've been through this before. I started up a committee many years ago, and to talk about, because Northfield had lost their chief, and we were losing our chief, and so Gil's the only one that had a chief at that time, and we tried to get a consensus of how we could go about starting a department of 3 towns. And the first thing that hit us hard when we had the first public meeting was nobody wants to see the cruiser in their town without their name on it. Serious, that's one of the things. The other thing is that we were told that from the town that had a chief is that they'd only go along if we kept their chief as the chief. Well, that's not how you do things. You have to look at the whole thing and maybe have a committee that actually picks a chief and that or interviews people. But I just throw that out because it's nothing urgent for right now, but it may be something for us to start thinking about and talking about as a group to move forward. Yes, Alex.
Yeah, just on top of that, Stan. So I was at MIMS a few years ago, and there was a Gill sergeant there, an Irving sergeant there, a Bernardston sergeant there, and a Northfield sergeant there, with nobody to supervise. And it was kind of an interesting sight to see. It was like, well, what can we do to perhaps maybe combine some of these departments a little bit? Because I just happened to mention that, and they all kind of laughed because it's true. I mean, these are all towns that have independent budgets that are independently funding their police departments, and they don't have anybody to supervise. So regionalization for policing in this area has been talked about for decades. Just ask any of the cops, Sergeant Richardson that you know, Chief Palmieri, Chief Hall, we've all talked about it. I would actually love to propose, potentially as a PhD topic in a couple years when I'm ready for that, a North County regional policing model that exists between the towns that I just mentioned. And I believe it is long overdue, and I believe as you consistently see the fiscal issues involving our municipalities with being able to properly fund and staff departments, especially when it gets complicated with training. As you couldn't tell, I majored in this in graduate school. Training and accreditation and all the necessary policies that go into policing, that out of all things that we talk about, the economies of scale make sense to do a combined practice when it comes to PDs. And so that's just, you're going to eventually see that model.
Well, we've tried before, and I'm sure we're going to try again. I sat on the same committee that Stan chaired. I think you chaired it, right?
Could you
And
see that model being extended to the fire department?
Sure.
Sure.
All of them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Fire.
Public
you are
safety.
you are looking at it for a new safety structure. You know, we just spent
Put them all in the same buildings.
$1 million plus for a new fire station right down the road.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a duplicate of services here. We need to start looking, besides police, fire. You already covered the EMS for us.
We all follow the
Well,
same chapters and sections.
I think the EMS is looking to become a regional
Yes, it is.
entity
Yes.
right now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of in the works. Ken?
Alex, I'd like to say that I'm totally in support of the regionalization effort, but I think we've got to be careful how we design it, because we're gonna end up with the same happiness that we have with PBRSD.
Right.
We've only spent an hour and a half railing about that, so let's make sure we do it right when we do it.
And
Dan?
You do realize that the people in this building right now are the ones that are gonna make that decision. The select boards and finance committees would recommend, but the select board would be the ones that would ultimately put that out there to the people in their town to vote on. So if the people in here will come up with a plan, you guys are the ones that are going to do it. The select board basically is the governing body for the 3 towns that are here. So you get the other towns involved, and you're it. The select board is it.
Buck stops here, buddy.
Pretty much. Well, not quite. Not quite, because it still has to go out to the taxpayers to chime in on that. But you could create that committee right now. You could come up with surveys, get it done, and it's the select boards that are going to be the governing body to do that.
And if I just may offer a very quick rebuttal on this situation that we're talking about. If you look in Greenfield right now, you will start seeing sheriff's office patrolling in the Greenfield. You're already seeing it. County law enforcement is making a comeback in this area. And when you have a department like Greenfield that is having unfortunate issues involving their
Unfortunate issues.
Senior departmental.
So you're seeing a county law enforcement presence with officers, deputies, if you will, that are trained to the same standards of accreditation that I spoke about earlier. So I think you're going to eventually start seeing more of that type of county outreach in other parts of the county where towns can't afford it. So.
Well, anybody else? Sarah?
Okay, Peggy, I know you were waiting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to point out that Ken and I are both on the Regionalization Task Force for EMS. So I think there'll be some interesting lessons that come out of it that we can bring back to the group. But right now we're waiting on a grant. Segue into one of your other topics. We're waiting on a grant with the UMass that we filed with the UMass Collins Center, and I think they also worked with Bernardston and Leyden on the police, the same guy. So I think there is some overlap already going on that maybe we bring those examples into this group and start examining how would that work for fire or police, because we're not quite there yet, and we've got a few years to really set up the structures.
Well, Bernardston and Leyden already have an agreement,
Right.
and it.
But I mean, if it goes beyond that.
It addresses how it can expand.
Yeah. Good. See, I didn't know that.
Okay, so we have police, fire, EMS.
Sarah's still down there.
I'm sorry, Sarah,
No
I
problem.
forgot.
So 2 things. First, I would like to suggest a quarterly meeting. So put it on the calendar that we would have a time when we got together and had these decisions, because it sounds like there's some discussions that are coming up that might be worth planning ahead. I have trouble, I'm real busy just like everybody else, I have trouble turning on a dime, and it'd be awesome to put it, have it out on the calendar. And the second thing is that, we are, at least our select board, are elected officials. And I just wanted to point out that our school board are also elected officials. And I think that if we want them to be a part of the meeting, we should have them be a part of the meeting. And the discussion was closed down before I had a chance to address the thing that I wanted to address, but I'll just say that we have a system of government in our towns that we've set up, and that is a representative. The school boards are representative. And when we talked earlier on, B said, hey, why don't we do it at the time of the election, and why don't we do it specifically, have people elected specifically for our towns. I think that also we need to respect that the people have spoken when they elect those people. And so I think that we need to keep that in mind when we're talking about the conversation about whether citizens had a chance or parents had a chance to contribute to discussions, because one of the ways that they contribute is they elect the people that they choose for those boards. And I'm actually not, coming down on one side or the other of that topic. I just want to make sure that we're not invalidating the votes of the citizens who voted to put those people on the board and make those decisions. And so if we, when we do our discussion about the new agreement, if we want to change the way that's set up, then that's one thing. But right now, our government, our agreement as citizens and as towns has been that organization. And so we need to be careful that we, as elected officials, don't undermine other elected officials.
And vice versa.
Absolutely.
Yeah, question over there too, Jane.
Oh, you're behind the post.
Yeah, right. I just wanted to make a comment. This is my first year on the Northfield Finance Committee, but I've been in municipal government finance for over 35 years. And about 20 of them have been with towns that are in this larger school district. And every December, usually the first or second Saturday, they have the all-town meeting where the school committee, the town select boards, and the FinComs all get together. They state their case, where they're at financially and such, and come up with a groundwork for to set up the budget. And then a lot of times in February, right before they're ready to wrap up the budget, the 4 towns will meet again and go fine tune it. It's just a comment I wanted to make. Loved it. I was surprised that they didn't have such a thing when I joined the finance committee.
Desi told the school district a number of years ago that they were to do that, and we are still waiting for them to do that.
Not too bad. It's a good benefit.
Yep, it is. Anybody else?
Where do we go from here?
So,
Sarah suggested that we set up some kind of quarterly meeting.
right, I was going to bring that up under the other, if we're finished talking about what other ways we might cooperate.
Actually, maybe it was your idea, Jane. You've got potential areas for working cooperatively. We talked about regionalization with EMS, certainly with PD, maybe fire. But the thing I saw that you actually wrote down was grant administration. I know we were looking for a grant writer. I don't know if we've hired anybody, but that would be a...
Yes. We will. We're about to.
We will.
Yep. We have
it was a good idea, but it was too late because I thought shared costs, shared rewards, but...
Right, well, I knew you were...
It's ARPA funded at this point.
It's gonna run out eventually.
Yeah, that might be another way for the towns to get together and say, instead of paying 3 different people to write grants for these towns, have one person do it or 1.5 people do it, however the metric works out.
Right.
And get a full-time position to help several different towns. I like that idea a lot.
Good. Well, if you don't hire somebody, maybe we can have that discussion, or maybe we can have it anyway.
Well, I think Keith was saying that's a grant-funded position.
Grant
so
funded,
it's
so
got to
it will be on a limited amount of time that the person that we will hire will be there. So.
It's ARPA fund, just FYI, because both Sarah and I are on that committee. It's ARPA funded for another 2 years, possibly longer, because we've had a hiring process and we're not currently paying anyone. But we're going to be presenting a candidate to the select board, so that person would be in place. And to me, 2 years down the road, we could start that discussion now, sooner, so that we're prepared when the Northfield ARPA funds run out on that position. Yeah.
Our grant coordinator did a lot. Like she provided a lot of funding for the town for a lot of different
Several
stuff.
million dollars.
Amazing, several million over the course of a year. So well worth it.
Yeah.
And with a 3-town, somebody working on a 3-town position, we get somebody super experienced who's bringing in a ton of money. They're worth it all day long if they're bringing in all that cash.
Yeah.
The other thing that I had jotted down was if we wanted to expand this to other towns. I think of Gill, because it's almost like we surround Gill. And,
well, they're on the EMS regionalization, so, and Irving is too, so we're already used to working
Gill
with
and
Gill on this
Irving
stuff.
and maybe Coleraine, and maybe they wouldn't be interested, but maybe for the future we can think about expanding this group to a larger entity.
We're gonna get a bigger table.
Well, if you're gonna get into the regionalization of police and fire, they would be involved in that. So, and they're already in EMT, so it would be a smart move if you start going into those different areas to
Right.
bring them in. As far as the school, they're kind of quasi part of that anyway.
Right.
So maybe an invitation would not be a bad thing. But again, right now it sounds like we're focusing on PVRS and the agreement. Once we get that somewhat squared away, and there would be part of that also. So it's kind of a no-brainer. You'd want to get them involved if you want to regionalize.
Right.
Okay, so earlier in the meeting, we said that we were going to have a meeting when everybody had gone over the district agreement, and that would just be the chairs from the 3 towns, right?
We didn't agree on that, it was just a comment.
We didn't agree on that.
What you're
Okay.
thinking about is a month from now, if we had a chance to do that, that you'd have the chairs of the finance and select board get together and discuss it. So that's where it is at the moment. That particular part. I think the other ones would be good to go to your quarterly
The
meeting.
Quarterly meetings as we had in the
Yeah.
past. So if we set up a meeting for 3 months from now, that would be June 6th, which is probably right close to graduation.
June 7th is graduation.
June 7th. Well,
It's
it's
the
close.
next week.
So you want to go to the June 13th?
Sure.
Always a good day to
Fine
meet.
with me.
Yeah. It's Thursday the 13th, though. not-
Thursday, June 13th. Does that sound good to you?
Is that at 6:30?
I kind of
At
have
6:30
it right
PM?
here.
No, that's fine.
May I get a clarification, 6:30 or 6 o'clock?
6:30.
Okay.
Good. That should be fun.
Enough people are employed that 6:30 works better for them. If I remember correctly, it's been a few years since I had to go to work. Not that I don't work anyway. Is there anything else that someone wants to mention? Anything you want to be sure to get on the next agenda?
Do you want to vote on what the constitution of the district agreement discussion? Because it was proposed, number one, that it would be only the chairs, but that wasn't something that we had discussed as a group.
I don't know if we need a vote on that.
I don't think we need a vote, but if there's,
If the body all feels that that's okay to vote.
I would prefer that it's not just chairs,
Aye.
for a wider audience, not just the chairs.
Agreed.
I also,
How
All
big
right,
of an
that-
audience would you be talking about? What would
this,
you think?
this same
The whole
group.
thing?
Same group.
Or those who can come.
And what my suggestion would be, we all do our homework, go through and read it, make our comments on it. And it's gonna be pretty hard, it'll be a long meeting, because trying to get everybody's ideas funneled into some sort of a document that we could discuss. And like I said earlier, at that point, we still have to have a school committee involvement.
do we want to get somebody's administrator to collate that? We
No.
can have, send it all in.
My opinion is that whether it's a smaller group to go over it first and then bring that more concise document to this whole group might speed things up.
Now, what should happen,
I would
Jay, is-
suggest it in reverse.
I also.
what should happen is the towns, you guys should get together in your own groups and go through it and list your ideas. We should get our ideas, and then we can have a better discussion at that point.
Okay, the note I made was that everybody was going to do their homework and then they were going to let Brian and me know when they were ready to go forward. And I didn't have anything on here about who everybody was.
Well, it seems that the same group is probably going to come back here June 13th at 6:30 and have their opinions by then.
So don't worry about getting it done sooner.
No.
We're not going to get anything else done at that meeting, though. that'll be the entirety of that meeting if we're talking
That's
about.
not necessarily so.
But that's fine if it is.
Oh, I'm
But-
sorry, I misunderstood because I thought you were talking about it being a really busy meeting full of everybody going together. And then I
But
wasn't trying to be rude, I was just trying to respect the process of having a group meeting as well.
Yeah, but that is the biggest thing we have on our table at the moment. So I would
That's
suggest that we
fine.
focus on that, then we can focus on
Yep.
things later on.
I agree.
All right.
Just one topic.
Yes, that one topic. We'll discuss that, everybody will have their say, and we'll try to come to a consensus that night. If not, we will have another one. But it gives everybody a chance here to look over the agreement, make notes. Some of the notes will probably be exactly the same. People are probably gonna have the same thoughts, I'm sure. So we might not be as long as you think. It might be redundant, but I think what we're all here to do is try to come to a consensus that is going to be beneficial to every town that is in that agreement. And the areas that are foggy or not clear, we want clarification. I think that's what we're all trying to get here, is clarification, and how does it affect our taxpayers?
Right. We want fairness on all
Exactly.
sides.
Yeah.
Couldn't say it better, Dan.
Yeah.
And
Well
Michelle,
said, Dan.
Michelle's gonna
Thank you.
send that document out again?
Michelle's
Those are-
going to send both
You
documents
said
out.
cancel
un-
2 meetings.
Unless she doesn't find the Heart Committee.
Yeah. That would be good to have both.
And I do have it, but I don't think it's on my computer. I can always scan it in and get it there, I guess.
I'm pretty sure I have it.
Is there a motion to adjourn? Oh, each committee has to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn Northfield Select Board.
Second.
I make a motion to adjourn the Northfield Finance Committee.
I make a motion to
Second.
adjourn the Bernardston Select Board.
Second.
All those
make
in
a
favor?
motion.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you all. Take your name tag for the next time. Save paper. Save your name tag.